said, without first awakening the natural love of the heart, no progress can be made. And in that respect, we might extrapolate fairly that without first awakening the love of the heart, no true intuitive perception of truth can be had. And it's, I think, perhaps a beautiful introduction both to chanting and to this class on Whispers from Eternity is to remember that there's a distinction between the comprehension of the mind and the understanding of the heart. And what we really need to work towards in all of our lives is to understand with the heart when it comes to our relationship to God. Because at the end, that's the only thing that will really matter. And not just at the end of our lives, but when push comes to shove and when trials shriek and worries howl at me, at the end of the day, it really comes down to what you really deeply feel, not just what you tell yourself. So let's begin together with a chant. And as you've learned in the past, let's begin with a robust and strong outward energy to gather together all of the subsidiary energies of our subconscious mind, all of our various pockets and holdouts of our heart and mind, and let's see if we can draw it together to a single point through devotional ardor, through cooperation with grace, as Master imbued in each one of these chants his unique vibration of God contact. Oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful. At thy feet, oh I do bow. At thy feet, oh I do bow. Oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful, oh God beautiful. In the forest thou art green, in the forest thou art green, in the mountain thou art high, in the mountain thou art high, in the river thou art restless, in the river thou art restless, in the ocean thou art grave, in the ocean thou art grave. O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful. At thy feet, O I do bow, at thy feet, O I do bow. O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful. To the serviceful thou art service, to the serviceful thou art service, to the lover thou art love, to the lover thou art love, to the sorrowful thou art sympathy, to the sorrowful thou art sympathy, to the yogi thou art bliss, to the yogi thou art bliss. O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful. At thy feet, O I do bow, at thy feet, O I do bow. O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful, O God beautiful. In the forest thou art green, in the forest thou art green, in the mountain thou art high, in the mountain thou art high, in the river thou art restless, in the river thou art restless, in the ocean thou art feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. To the serviceful thou art service, to the serviceful thou art service, to the lover thou art love, to the lover thou art love, to the sorrowful thou art sympathy, to the sorrowful thou art sympathy, to the yogi thou art bliss, to the yogi thou art bliss. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, 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 oh God, beautiful. Let's sit up straight together for a few moments. Let's concentrate at the point between the eyebrows. And let's begin with a prayer. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, dearest friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, we bow before all of you. Bless us tonight with the wisdom necessary to be able to perceive you in everything. Teach our hearts to feel behind every experience your loving hand. Help us to receive your blessings, your guidance, your love, until at last we surrender ourselves completely. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay. So, my name is Keshava, if we haven't met yet, or if it's been a while. And it's my pleasure to get to be with you all for this final class on the Divine Romance, how to awaken devotion and love for God, especially through the tools and techniques and gifts that our great Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, has given to us. And our topic for today is, broadly speaking, on his book of prayer demands entitled Whispers from Eternity. And this is a book of what he calls answered prayers. And it's a great piece of literature and a great piece of liturgy in that each one of the poems, as we'll see as we start reading into them, are quite exuberant explosions of devotion for the divine. But what I find really interesting about this piece of work is that more than just being a book of prayers and a manual for how to pray, rather, this book is a handbook in right attitude. And that's something that Swami Kriyananda himself said about this book, which is a rather enigmatic statement at first. Because on the surface level, they seem like prayers of, like I said, extreme exuberance that frankly feel a little bit beyond our reach. You know, sometimes it feels more like my speed of prayer is, God, I'm suffering and life is hard and I'd really appreciate some help. And he sets his standards a little bit higher when it comes to this book. But what was very interesting for me personally, is that when I heard Swami Kriyananda say that this book was a handbook in right attitude, that really piqued my interest, and I began to investigate it from the perspective of reverse engineering. And I asked myself, if it's true that this book will teach you right attitude, how is that possible? And how can I interact with this book in such a way as to draw from it that supreme blessing? Now, I'm going to back up just a little bit and define what right attitude is and why it's essentially important on the spiritual path. And we could say that our attitude is simply the way, or rather the consciousness with which we respond to the circumstances of life. As Shakespeare put it, there is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. And isn't it interesting, though, that we sometimes struggle to control the way that we think about certain circumstances, and that very frequently spells whether or not we're quite elated or utterly miserable in our day-to-day lives. Like, isn't it remarkable that one moment you might be totally happy and on top of cloud nine, and then the next day you're in the dumps, and factually speaking, nothing has really changed except for maybe your perception of something? And that the way that we respond to life is really so much of what actually dictates our own experience of it. And like we were just saying at the beginning of the class before we started chanting, so much of the spiritual path actually really comes down to, where is your heart pointing? When your heart meets the circumstances of life, does it point upwards towards God? Basically, do you break in the line of divine remembrance and of devotional self-surrender? Or do we tend to break more towards the side of egoic self-involvement and selfishness and contraction? And really, right attitude is let me simply say, attitude is the science of self-reflection and of asking, what is the consciousness with which I respond to life? And therefore, a right attitude would be the consciousness and the response that draws you upwards, and a wrong attitude is simply one that draws you away from where you'd really like to be going. And that is a terrifying realization, because then now all of a sudden that means that we have to start taking accountability for the way that we respond to every little circumstance, and that the level of our own consciousness, the awareness of love in our hearts, and the vividness of our own divine romance with God actually ultimately comes down to ourselves. And that's kind of scary. It'd be much nicer if we could just blame it on the weather or something like that. And so once we kind of get over the hurdle of initial fear of realizing that we have to take accountability for our attitude and learn how to respond in the right way to every circumstance, then we begin to ask the question, how? And then full circle, we come right back to this book. And we realize that if this book could teach us the secret of right attitude, this book very well may teach us the key to not just right living, not how to be happy, but how to succeed truly in everything, and how to be victorious spiritually. And to put it into the framework of the last 4 weeks of this class, how to turn every moment into an experience of devotion. Because I think you guys have all probably had, dare I say, you wouldn't be here again on week number 4 if weeks 1, 2, and 3 weren't at least somewhat fruitful. And so that tells me that when we talked about prayer, prayer was meaningful to you. When we talked about chanting, it was meaningful. And that when we discussed the affirmations or visualizations or metaphysical meditations, that those were able to elicit certain experiences in your heart. But what initially begins as inspiration with those particular techniques eventually begins to beg the divine for more. Because let's ask ourselves the honest question. We could play a little game and I could say, who here in the room is able to practice formal prayer for 12 hours a day? 8 hours a day? And so on and so forth. I could ratchet this down until we got to 5 minutes, and we might start seeing some hands, right? Yeah, great, good job, Kate. Okay, and so what I mean to say by this is not that we're all bad devotees, but rather that in this day and age, and given who and what we are and the circumstances in which we live, it may not be practical for us to spend the majority of our time in contemplative prayer, in interiorized meditation, in formal chanting, in japa, and so on and so forth. When in a period of my life I was able to do a little bit of mindless activity, I found that I could pursue such wholesome mental activities like chanting the Gayatri mantra for 8 or 9 hours a day. Because if I'm not doing anything that requires 100% of my brain power, I can take 35% of that and just sit in the background chanting to God, which feels very wholesome and very spiritually enlightening and is lovely. But let's face the facts. How many of us can do that the majority of our day? We probably spend most of our time absorbed in trying to deal with the circumstances of life as best we can. And then after 8 or 10 or 12 hours of vigorously interacting with the material plane, we kind of come back through the front door, in a flurry, panting, and try and recover our inner state of calm and that divine romance. And then we wonder why our meditations are dry, or we wonder why it's hard to pray when we're at home. And again, if you have some of those Judeo-Christian samskars, then you sit there and you self-flagellate yourself and you're like, it's my fault, it's because I'm terrible. But maybe it's because we're not approaching it quite right. And maybe what's missing is not that we need to do those formal things more, but maybe we need to understand the essence of what those are trying to bring us to. And that we need to begin to incorporate that into everything that we do, into everything that we say, into every activity that we undertake. And we need to spiritualize our daily life and our daily obstacles, our tribulations, our hopes, our dreams, our responsibilities, until everything becomes a sadhana, until everything becomes as God-reminding as your meditation. Now that sounds really nice. Have I accomplished that? No. But we've taken some steps forward towards that, and that's what this book really has to reveal to us. This book is a handbook in how to live. It's a handbook in how to respond to life, to how to spiritualize your daily experiences, and how to take this native seeds of your own nature and develop them into the fully mature flowers of a garden of self-realization. And the way that Master Yogananda is able to accomplish that in a simple book of prayer demands is that each one of these prayer demands takes an essential experience of human nature or an aspiration of the heart and takes it all the way to its highest aspect, its highest aspiration. He devotionalizes and spiritualizes like nearly every quality of human life. And this is really important when we're talking about the divine romance, that we need to draw together all parts of who and what we are into that great act of learning to love God. That loving God and loving your children, loving God and doing your work well, are not two separate things, but they are one and the same. And learning how to become integrated, which is in fact the goal of yoga, is what this book has to offer. And I'd like to give you an example of that. So, for example, many people have probably come to realize, either by their own experience or by the readings of the work of Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda, that mornings are important times. And that the way you start a day will sometimes indicate how the rest of the day goes, right? And we've all heard the expression that, oh, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or I had a bad morning, and it sort of bleeds out into everything else that you do. But so I'm sure some of us at various points in our life have fallen onto the spectrum of fanaticism as far as your morning routine is concerned, trying to make sure that your morning routine is perfect so that the rest of the day goes exactly the way that you'd want it to. I'm going to experiment with brushing my teeth first and then meditating, or meditating and then brushing my teeth, and so on and so forth. But what's interesting is Yogananda, instead of saying to you, oh, you foolish little, plebeian, don't you know to just be with God all the time? He says, let's take that aspiration to start a day correctly, to start off your life on the right foot, to begin new ventures with God and with enthusiasm and with divine grace, and let's take it to the highest possible octave. And so, just as a simple example, because I'm so touched by this, because an avatar writing a book of poems and prayers, we might think that he would write prayers like, prayers to be liberated in this lifetime, prayers to overcome all of my past sins, prayers to be able to heal every injured animal on the planet. And then he's like, prayer at dawn. Oh, okay. I guess I'll start there. Very practical. So I want you guys to go on a little bit of an imaginative experience with me. So let's all sit up straight. And I want you to close your eyes. And the first thing I want you to do is I want you to, strangely enough, imagine that you're in your own bedroom and you're waking up in the morning. And so imagine, if it's the alarm clock going off, the sweet, tender, cuddly feelings of your bed and the warmth therein, perhaps the reluctance to get up and to start the day. Just be totally self-honest about how your day and your consciousness usually is. And I want you to ask yourself the simple question, albeit maybe a challenging one to answer. What is the consciousness with which I respond to this circumstance, to the circumstance of waking up, to beginning a day, to greeting the morning? How do I typically relate to that moment? And of course, for all of us, it's going to be a nuanced thing. There's going to be some reluctance, some eagerness, some tiredness, some willingness, and so on and so forth. And now I want you to, with your eyes closed, listen to these words. But rather than imagining that they are something outside of yourself, I want you to imagine that these words are erupting spontaneously from the inside of your own heart, as if these were the most natural expression of who and what you are at the very beginning of the day. So imagine that you are now just waking, you are just coming to consciousness, you're in your bed, and these are the first spontaneous thoughts that spring to your mind. With the opening of the earliest dawn and the lotus buds, my soul softly opens in prayer to receive thy light. Bathe each petal of my mind with thy radiant rays. I saturate myself with the perfume of thy presence, and I wait to waft with the breeze the aroma of thy message of love to all. Bless me, that with the spreading dawn I may spread thy love everywhere. Bless me, that with the awakening dawn I may awaken all souls with my own and bring them to thee. Now, you can always open your eyes for a moment. Now, wouldn't that be a way to wake up in the morning, right? And it just takes a little bit of imagination to begin to, imagine the domino effect. And one thing that I want to point out is that when we read these prayer demands, as I led, we shouldn't think of them as, that's how a master thinks when he wakes up in the morning, but rather we should think to ourselves, what would it take for me to think like that in the morning? That this is a roadmap, it's a blueprint. It's for us to reverse engineer, to crack open, to understand, to digest, and to become. That ultimately these whispers from eternity are not meant to be memorized and recited verbatim per se, but rather you're supposed to become them and tell you are the living poetry of this prayer. I'm reminded by a very touching story of St. Francis, which I'm sure instantly all of you know before I even say it, but just for fun, I'll share it nonetheless, which is that St. Francis, who is one of the great Catholic saints of history and a great devotional lover of Christ, and he had no formal training as a mystic, no formal meditation techniques, but he was able to perform great miracles. He resurrected the dead, he healed the blind, he healed the lepers, and he really rejuvenated the entire Catholic Church by the sheer power of his magnetic love. And one day, Francis was walking along, some of his disciples wrote, and I love this story because there's no witnesses. And so, we don't, strictly speaking, know if it's actually true, but it's real. And Francis was walking along, and there was a woman begging, but she was blind, and she couldn't see that he was far even poorer than she. And she begged of him something. She asked for alms, and Francis realized that he had nothing to give to her, and he felt really bereft, wishing that he could offer something to this poor woman, when he realized that he did have something that was of value, which was his beautiful, illuminated Bible that could be sold and used as quite a lot of money. And so eagerly he handed her the Bible and he said, "Take this, go and sell it, and with that money, buy whatever you need." And the woman thanked him profusely, and as she began to leave, Francis burst into tears, and he said, "Oh Lord, forgive me. I have given away your word." And the story goes that Francis heard Christ's response in his mind, and Christ said to him, "Oh Francis, how can you give away my word when it is written on your heart?" And so when we talk about learning these whispers from eternity, of course, recite it every day. Memorize it. Say it eagerly, many times. As soon as you wake up, throw the covers off and start saying, "With the opening of the earliest light and the lotus buds," and see what happens. But go beyond that. Try to inscribe it upon your heart. Try and find the essential vibration, the inspiration behind the words. And that's actually the advice that Yogananda writes in the introduction to this book. He says, words are meaningless in and of themselves. They're only symbols, that they are like seeds that must be crushed to expel and to reveal the oil of true God realization. And so just like when we chant, when we say a chant loudly and then more and more with greater interiorization, with these prayers, you can do the same. But eventually try not to just think the words, but try to be them. And so, like now again, just as a brief moment, I want to just go through this line by line, and I want you to ask yourself, what would it feel like to be that? With the opening of the earliest dawn and the lotus buds, my soul softly opens in prayer to receive thy light. What a way to begin the day, softly opening to receive the light of God. Bathe each petal of my mind with thy radiant rays. I saturate myself with the perfume of thy presence. And I wait to waft with the breeze the aroma of thy message of love to all. Think of that. I wait to waft with the breeze the aroma of thy message of love to all. What would it be like to have this be your essential attitude, the way in which you respond to life? That to every person that you meet, the aroma of God's love is what they first perceive. Wouldn't that be magnificent? Don't you think we'd all be a little happier if we were a little bit more like that?
What is the number?
11. Bless me, that with the awakening dawn, I may awaken all souls with my own and bring them to thee. And that's how to wake up in the morning. That's prayer number 11 out of like 300. So I think, just by that example alone, I think we can extrapolate that there's an enormous amount to be gained from this book. I'll share with you just anecdotally that when I began my investigation of this text, what I did, and which I recommend anybody do if you feel so inspired, is I chose a single prayer, and I didn't start with this one, this was the second or third. And I chose a single prayer, and I would recite it every single day before my morning meditation and my evening meditation many times until I could memorize it. And then after I memorized it, I would say it as many times as I could remember throughout the day to try and deeply imbibe its vibration into my heart. And I would do that for an entire month. And I would just set that as an arbitrary amount of time to give me patience. I think when on the spiritual path, sometimes we abandon techniques or prayers or affirmations a little bit prematurely. That patience is necessary for success in these undertakings. I had someone tell me that they did several 100,000 repetitions of the Gayatri mantra. And that after doing that, which took them 10 years, and that at the end of the 10 years of chanting hours a day, really, they started feeling a great divine light. And I thought to myself, yeah, I bet you did. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to go back and do a little more Gayatri mantra. But so we should be patient with these things. If we think, how many lifetimes have we spent having a different attitude? How many lifetimes have we spent watering the tree of grumpy mornings? And now, we get to harvest the fruit of those trees. And so it would behoove us to be just a little bit patient when we're beginning to cultivate the new orchards of wholesome spiritual attitudes, because actually they take root quite quickly and they bear fruit quite quickly. And what is magnificent is with just a little bit of work, in a couple of years, in a short decade or two, you'll know that it's working because someone will say to you, Kate, I don't know why, but every time I'm around you, I just feel so loved. And you'll be like, wow, I think that prayer is starting to work out. It's starting to happen. And that's really the great joy of this, is that then it begins to spiritualize every part of your life. It just begins to take over and take hold of everything. So now just as a little bit of a fun romp, I want to give a little bit of, what do you call it? Like, what is it like when you have like one of those like cheese boards of all these like different flavors and stuff? Okay, we're gonna have like a smorgasbord of prayers to kind of show like how diverse and applicable some of these might be. And so, waking up in the morning, everybody has to do it until you don't, and then hopefully you pass that test. And when I die, I'd like to be like, my soul softly opens. Like, wouldn't that be a great reflexive response? Like, you see the light and you're like, great, God, I'm ready, because I'm always ready with the dawn. Okay, so now here's a new prayer, maybe a little more to the beating heart.
Say the numbers.
Okay, I will say the numbers. This is number 62, found on page 71. This is, teach me, though crushed by criticism, to return always sweet forgiveness. Teach me to behave like the orange, which, though crushed and bitten, never fails to impart its sweetness. Battered by unkindness, gnawed at by carping criticism, or hewn with hard words and cruel behavior, teach me yet to pour out unceasingly the sweetness of love. Teach me to be like soap flakes, which, when rubbed and beaten, give out only cleansing foam. Tried and tested by ingratitude, teach me nevertheless to offer in return the snow-white foam of wisdom. Wow. So that's a high bar. I don't know about you guys. I'm a little more comfortable with the dawn prayer. I feel like that one's like a little more approachable to me. Having a good morning, great. Returning criticism with nothing but sweet forgiveness, and though beaten and tried with ingratitude, to return only the snow-white foam of wisdom. I got to work on that a little bit more. But one thing that I would like to invite all of you is to really use your imaginations. And just what's interesting is when we talk about devotion, we sometimes think of devotion merely as being a sentimental feeling of the heart. And no doubt that is an experience of devotion. When perhaps you chant rigorously, or you pray deeply, or you have a moment of great revelation in your life, you may feel a titanic upswelling of feeling in the heart that is Godward pointing and God remembering, and it's very sweet, is it not? But what usually happens is that feeling goes away. And we would love to be able to live in that state of rapture at all times, but that's not really practical for many of us because we're not there yet in our spiritual lives, nor is it necessarily what we're being asked to do. Once I was walking down the stairs of my home after a particularly deep meditation, and I felt a sudden spell of this just achingly deep bliss and this immense yearning for God. And it was like as my foot was about to touch on the next step, I felt that incredible bliss, and my foot hit the step, and I thought, God, why can't you let me feel this all the time? And then I took one more step, and I realized, because then I'd never get anything done. And so if you're living a life of service and of guru seva in this life, either formally or through the responsibilities of your formal life, maybe that's not for you yet. But But this is important to think about, because if we think that devotion is only that tender feeling of the heart, then many of us will end up feeling like real failures as devotees most of the time, because we don't feel like that. But that can't be the case, because, if you've been sticking around for a long time, something's working. And so I would like to just offer a reframing of what devotion means. That yes, devotion is a feeling, devotion is an aspiration, devotion is that ineffable yearning to be made one again with God. But devotion is also the aspiration for those things. Devotion is the hope that those things can come to pass. Devotion is the daringness of the heart to believe that it could be possible and to imagine what your life could be if that were true. And what's interesting is this is so important, I think, on the spiritual path, that the moment we begin to lose, in a sense, that divine insanity that tells us that we can accomplish our divine mission, is the day that we'll really begin to lose hope. And the day that we lose hope, we begin to despair. And Satan really begins to get his claws in us. And so, we need to, I think, as a practice of devotion, be recklessly, unendingly imaginative about what God could be. And something that I find really interesting is that no matter how brilliant and how beautiful and how incredible you imagine God to be, it's never anything compared to how wonderful it truly will be. Because Master describes God as being infinite, ever conscious, ever new, ever expanding bliss. It's beyond imagination of expectancy, he says. But so we should try and imagine it anyway, and then we'll still be surprised by it. Because no one, if you don't believe that the future could be better than the present, will be willing to put out more energy than they have before. If you don't believe that you could be happier tomorrow than you are today, then you'll stop trying. If you don't believe that you could be a happier devotee in a decade than you are now, then you'll just become complacent. And complacency is the byword for tamas. We need to hope. We need that divine, like I said, the insanity of hope. The way that Devarshi, Nayaswami Devarshi expressed this, which really stuck in my mind. For those of you who don't know, Devarshi is, I think, an incredibly high soul, a man of so much spiritual magnetism that sometimes for me to be in his presence brings tears to my eyes, because I feel it's such a tangible blessing to me. And he said he would walk every day, every Friday, to a 3-hour meditation that he would lead. And I think we can all relate to this, especially those of us who have done regular 3-hour meditations, is that many times he'd be walking across the field to that 3-hour meditation, sort of dreading every step getting closer to the meditation mat, wondering, is this going to be one of those meditations that just drags on and is super painful and my knees hurt and I'm distracted and I don't feel anything. And, we all feel like that, I think, on many of our meditations. I had a student, I teach at the Living Wisdom High School, and I had the students try to learn to control their minds. And I asked them, who here could control their mind? And they were self-honest enough to say, well, not me. And I said, it's pretty hard, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, what if I told you I could teach you techniques to begin to learn how to control your mind? And I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Sounds like ninja training. And then one of the students said, Keshava, can you control your mind? And I said, no, but I'm getting better at it. but what Devarshi said when he was walking across that field is he said one day he felt this irrational thought bloom in his heart, just like this craziness that cried out, maybe today's the day. Maybe today's the day that I'll meet God. And he said it wasn't just like an intellectual thought, it was actually the wonderment. What if today's the day that God comes to me? What if today's the day that moksha comes, that liberation comes, that I burst the boundary of this little heart and I get to skip across all infinity hand in hand with Divine Mother, across all time and futurity and all my past lives? Hey, if you knew that was going to be tonight, you'd be real eager to go home, wouldn't you? You'd be like, Keshava, listen, it's been a great class, but I really gotta go. But what if we could really believe in that more and more every day and remember that? And what if we could carry that into every meditation? Not just every meditation, not just every prayer, but every day. What if this was the day that you finally won the ultimate game of hide and go seek with Divine Mother? Because let's face it, that's basically what life is. It's like a match of like unbeaten hide and go seek with God, and she just is really, 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 really good at hiding. But what if today was the day? Can you imagine what it would be like to, as Master described, to see the material world dissolve in front of your eyes and turn into a molten river of light? And to see people dissolve not as a human form, but turn into an astral form? That's kind of spectacular. That's really interesting. That'll get me up in the morning. But can you imagine what it would be like to be able to return any criticism with nothing but sweetness? Can you imagine how powerful you would be? How untouchable you would feel? And I mean, it's such a cheap rhetorical question, but all I have to ask is, has anybody in the room ever felt their heart hurt by criticism before? And we don't even need to see any hands here, right? If I said, who here has been hurt by criticism in the last week, now we're starting to have a little bit more of an interesting poll, right? But remember that when the heart is hurt, it contracts. And the devotee, to find success, must have the dynamic heart, the courageous heart. And though he compares this so touchingly to being an orange, which I never looked at an orange and been like, oh God, please make me like the orange. But nonetheless, there's greatness in this little prayer. And I think, now I also want to highlight, that this prayer teaches us how to see the world like Master sees the world. Yogananda sees an orange and says, ah yes, God's great masterpiece, reminding us that we can respond to all criticism with nothing but kindness. Okay, I got to work a little bit on my divine vision, I guess. Let's listen to this again. And like I said, I want you to imagine what consciousness would it take for you to write this poem, for you to be this poem, to inscribe it upon your heart, to live this every day. Teach me to behave like the orange, which, though crushed and bitten, never fails to impart its sweetness. Battered by unkindness, gnawed at by carping criticism, or hewn with hard words and cruel behavior, teach me yet to pour out unceasingly the sweetness of love. Teach me to be like soap flakes, which, when rubbed and beaten, give out only cleansing foam. Tried and tested by ingratitude, teach me, nevertheless, to offer in return the snow-white foam of wisdom. What a magnificent promise that is. Now, let's have a little change of pace. So this is another prayer demand. We'll just dive right into it, and I'll let it speak for itself. This is number 66. Burn thou my frailties in the furnace of trials. In the furnace of trials, the ore of my life is being purified. The fire of experience melts away all my delusions' dross. O divine artisan, burn away all my impurities. Bring out in me the steel of endurance and hone it to a fine edge by deep calmness. Forge in me, from the tempered steel of mental balance, sharp swords of self-control and firm tenacity. With the weapon of inner equilibrium, teach me to fight every enemy of distraction. So, completely different in its feeling, right? And in its demand. Now but do you see that these prayers are really also a response to certain of life circumstances that we might be going through? I myself once felt that I was in a phase of my life when I felt that Divine Mother had me in a crucible, and just everything had to be burned away. And so rather than fighting it or resisting it and saying, Divine Mother, please stop, I challenged myself to see if I could have the courage to say, all right, Divine Mother, purify me. Burn away all the dross. Forge in me the tempered steel of endurance, honed to a sharp edge by deep calmness. It was scary. It was scary, but can you imagine what strength arises out of that? I'm still trying to imagine what strength arises out of that. And you see, we've all had furnaces of trials in our life where we feel that everything good is being burned and everything hard is being heaped upon our backs. But isn't it interesting that in life, if you think about it, one of the key, one of the most pivotal things that defines whether or not we suffer is if we reject or accept life's circumstances. And that's really something to consider deeply. Swami Kriyananda said it more beautifully, which is that he said the essence of all suffering is wishing that things were other than they are. And that's worth putting on your bathroom mirror right there. That the essence of all suffering is wishing that things were other than they are. And we wish that politics were other than they are, that nations other than they are, that humanity other than it is. I find it actually as a little brief tangent here. You're like, uh-oh, what is he going to say now? We're so eager for the world to be beautiful, which is true. And we tell ourselves that we're in Dwapara Yuga, and so people ought to be more civilized than they were 1,000 years ago. But I will remind you that Dwapara Yuga is like the equivalent of being 12 years old, or like 9. And kids when they're 9 or 10 still bite each other, okay? And we wouldn't consider a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old to be an exponent of wisdom. And so why are we hanging around thinking that this world is going to suddenly become a utopia because we went into Dwapara Yuga 300 years ago? Master said that Dwapara Yuga was the bloodiest, most war-torn, destructive age, when mankind was most ripe to destroy itself. And in the Greek mythology, when the Greeks describe the yugas, they say in the Bronze Age, which is Dwapara Yuga, mankind wiped itself out, and that only a few survivors were able to repopulate the earth. Myth or truth? We don't know, but I think it's interesting. We're in Dwapara Yuga, friends. Let's remember that this is not our home. We don't have to perfect the mud puddle. We got to perfect the heart. And that when we wish things to be other than they are is when we really suffer. And we don't wish things to be other than they are when life is going the way that we want it to. But as soon as it begins to tip over into those dislikes, into pain, then all of a sudden we kind of lose our courage and we really wish that things were different. But in a weird way, this poem is what we might describe as being very right-handed tantra, which means the way of confrontation. Put another way, it means the way of dynamic, courageous acceptance. That whatever life is bringing to you, Rita, is there anything in this world that could be other than God? Is there anything under the sun that isn't imprinted with the signature of divine consciousness, albeit perhaps extremely shrouded by ignorance? And if that's the case, why would we resist anything? Why wouldn't we just accept with open arms all experiences? God made joy, but so too God made pain. But isn't it interesting that we're all much more eager to try and have fun time with God as joy, but when he shows up as pain, we're like, no, it's good. You can wait outside. Just a brief, again, anecdote about this. I had a very entertaining bout with appendicitis when I was younger. And I had a unique experience, I think, typically speaking, in that most of the time when you get appendicitis, it gets bad, and then it gets worse, and then it gets really, really bad. And if you don't do anything about it, you can die. One of the key indicators that it's appendicitis is that it never gets better. Nothing can make it better. Usually it's like once you start that chain reaction, there's no going back. But interestingly enough, I got a gallstone, and the gallstone would roll into my appendix and start giving me appendicitis symptoms, which is excruciating abdominal pain and contractions and inability to hold down food and liquids, and basically you just think you're going to die. But then the pain would go away, which is super weird because if it's appendicitis, it shouldn't go away. And so the first time this happened, being a young and dumb 19-year-old something, when that started happening, I began thinking, oh my God, this might be appendicitis. And like a moron, I waited like 4 hours of being in like excruciating pain. And then the pain started going away. And I thought, oh my God, it's not appendicitis, because if it was appendicitis, I'd be dead. And I'm not saying this was wise, but just bear with me. And so that happened like 10 or 12 more times. I know I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's true. Until finally one day, it was so bad and it lasted for about 12 hours. I stayed up all night shaking like a leaf in agony. And I had lost so much fluids that I was beginning to like be unable to walk. And I finally agreed to be taken to the hospital. And I was in so much pain. It was very interesting. I actually think I kind of drew this experience to myself. Here comes the happy leg kicking. Okay. Because, I think it's really interesting to think about our consciousness and to think about our attitudes and to think about how we respond to life. And I don't know about you guys, but I sometimes wonder, like, if I was St. Francis and I had the book and the woman asked me for the book, would I give her the book? Like, would I think about that? If I was with Yogananda when he was, San Fernando III or William, and he asked me to go die for him in the battle, would I do it or would I chicken out? And what I think is kind of interesting is, in a sense, we don't really know until you're put in that position. You can hypothesize and you can say I've been in close situations, but you never really know until you're actually there. And so I used to wonder, what would I actually do if I was in like 10 out of 10 pain? Or if I really thought I was going to die, where would my mind go? And I just wondered. I was like, would I have like the courage to really give my life to God, to like face that kind of pain and suffering and still keep Master with me, or would I break? And I was like, that's really interesting. And Divine Mother gave me the opportunity to test that out. And it was really interesting because for the 12 hours, I kept trying to hold the pain out. I kept telling myself my pain is, my mind is strong. I don't have to suffer. I'm going to ignore the pain. And, well, that didn't work out very well for me. And what was really interesting was it did break me. It was so intense. It was like this force on all sides of my psyche, not just the physical pain. It was trying to break my will. And what was so fascinating was literally when I was taken to the hospital, I was in so much pain I couldn't walk, and I had to ask them to go get a wheelchair for me because I couldn't ambulate. And they wheeled me into the hospital, and I think that was the moment that my young man's ego finally broke, and I realized that the pain was so much beyond me. And I said to God, all right, God, I am always eager to welcome you into my life, into my mind, into my heart, into my body when you come to me as love. But now you have chosen to come to me as pain. And so, Divine Mother, because I am not strong enough to resist the pain and to keep my mind on you, I'm going to worship you as pain. And what was very interesting was I thought that was a failure, because I thought I hadn't been strong enough. But what was fascinating is the moment I just accepted, this is God as pain. It's not that the pain got any less, but I didn't suffer anymore. It was the most peculiar experience. And I no longer was struggling and straining and fighting and resisting and wishing that the pain would stop. I just let the pain wash through me. I just let the pain take over, and I just imagined that it was God. I said, Divine Mother, you are this pain. Take me. Do whatever you want with me. I'm a little boy, and you have me in your current. And what was actually kind of miraculous was a series of miracles actually happened. I mean, I think they're little miracles. It's not like Jesus appeared and I was saved. But like little things, like I didn't know what to do. And the last text message I sent on my phone was to one of my friends who happened to be a retired surgeon before my phone died. And I said, you're not going to believe this, but I'm at Cedars-Sinai Hospital and my phone died. And then I'm sitting there and the doctors are trying to advise me of what to do. I'm like totally out of it and I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden a nurse comes in and says, Michael Eob is here to see you. Do you know who that is? And I said, oh yeah, send him in. And he said, I left work as soon as I could. And the surgeons are sitting there telling me, you have to decide right now. And I said, Michael, what do I do? He looked at the chart, he talked to the doctors, and he turned to me and he said, you're getting a surgery right now. And like he just came in and took care of me, told me what to do. They wheeled me off, they did surgery, it was great. As they were putting me under anesthetics, I was like telling jokes to the people. But then like what was really sweet, just as an example, I gave myself to God and I just let God come to me as pain. And instead of trying to fight the pain and be a heroic disciple and not let it touch me, I just said, okay, good, Divine Mother, you're here in my life as pain, I accept. Now that I'm here, please use me as an instrument of your blessing and of your love to all these people who now have to help take care of me. And that was my prayer. And I woke up and after the surgery and I was lying in my little bed and there was this really nice, giant male nurse, bald, huge beard, muscular, tattooed. And he was taking care of me throughout the night. And in the morning, he was talking to me and checking in with me, and I thanked him for how beautiful his service had been to me. And he looked at me and he said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. I still remember his name. His name was Stavrov. And I said, what's on your mind? And he said, and he pulls up a chair and he says, I don't know why, but I feel like you're going to understand this. Is divine love real? And I said, yes, Stavrov, divine love is real. And he said, I had this experience. I don't think I can explain it to anybody. And then he sat and told me a 10-minute story about how his life was changed because he had been praying very sincerely to have an experience of whether or not Divine Mother really existed. And then one day in a car full of a bunch of his friends, he felt Divine Mother's presence come to him. And he said he burst into tears and cried for like an hour straight and wasn't able to speak. And that was months ago. And sitting there next to my bed, and he's crying again, and he's saying, is God real? Is what I experienced true, or did I make it all up? And I'm like patting his hand. I'm like, Stavrov, it's real. It's true. Divine Mother is real. And I can teach you how to find her more effectively than that if you'd like. And it was a miracle, really, to me. But I want to just imagine if instead of accepting that experience, I had continued to fight it. Imagine if instead of asking Divine Mother to use me as her instrument in whatever capacity she saw fit, I continued to assert my limited egoic understanding of what it meant to be a good disciple, to be strong or to be capable or to be able to resist pain because that's what a yogi should be able to do. Who knows what might have happened. And so these prayer demands will teach you that. They'll teach you how to respond appropriately in the moments that it matters most. So let's do another one together. Here's a simple one. I love this prayer. If I can find it. Oh, I just misread my own handwriting. Okay, so now this is something that I also encourage you guys to do, is do a little bit of like spiritual archaeology with a book like this. That if you've ever had a question about if you ever had a question about what Master said and what it really means on a deeper level, I encourage you, don't let those just go by. You know, if Master makes a statement or Swami Kriyananda makes a statement such as the essence of all suffering is wishing things other than what they are, don't just be like, oh, wow, interesting, and like sweep that one off, but like make a note of it, think about it, go research it, go find what Master wrote about it, pray about it, meditate about it for like, a year and then see what happens. But this is prayer number 95, demand for wisdom. And the reason why I got really into this prayer is because Yogananda described that there are 8 universal aspects of God. Peace. Have we all felt peace before? Like just go to Yosemite National Park. Go walk in the national park until you see the snake. You feel peace, right? It's not that hard, okay? Like have a really relaxing Saturday afternoon or like a nice spa experience and like you believe that peace is possible, right? Okay, and then we might have power. I know what power, like I can conceptually kind of understand power. Like I've been in a jet when it takes off. I like weightlifting. I get it. I know what it's like to have willpower instead of being like a spineless worm in life, okay? And then love. Okay, we all probably at least have some general conception of what love is. So when Master says God is love, you go, oh yeah, that's nice. But then he says God is light. Okay, sure. God is sound. Sure. God is calmness. Maybe that's more revealing about me than anything else. But no, for a long time I was like, what's the distinction between calmness and peace? And like, what does that really mean? But the one that really bamboozled me was wisdom. And again, like, could I give you an intellectual definition of what wisdom is? Sure. Could I probably write you like a couple of good essays about it when I was younger? Sure. But what I mean is, like, when I'm meditating, do I know the specific vibration of wisdom as opposed to peace, as opposed to love, as opposed to calmness? Could I really tell if I was feeling wisdom as a divine aspect? Do I really know what that is? And to me, that was like really amorphous. And I just sat there and I thought to myself, what the heck is wisdom? And now, of course, that might be a little bit of an embarrassing omission, but nonetheless, it's true. And so when I was going through this book, I saw demand for wisdom, and I thought, first off, I need a lot more of that in my life. And secondly, I don't really understand what that even means. So let's see what Master had to say about it. And I was flipping through this book in the, the index, and I was seeing all the different prayers, such as, I love these titles. Flood me with thy omnipresent love. Oh yeah, sounds good. Demand for fervor in divine love. Okay, yeah. Make me a smile millionaire. Sure. But then I saw demand for wisdom and I went, oh man, now that seems like something I'd really like to spend some time with. Now, I say that to you because I encourage you to do the same thing. Go through the index, look at all the titles, and just see what jumps out to you. Spend a little bit of time with it. It's a romance. Date it a little bit. Get to know it. See what happens. Okay. But at any rate, so here we are, prayer number 95, demand for wisdom. I love this. Close your eyes. Demand for wisdom. O Spirit, thou art I am thou. Thou art wisdom. I am wisdom. Thou art bliss. I am bliss. You can open your eyes. What was my reaction when I read that poem? Exactly. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, we go from the orange metaphor and the soap bubbles and the furnace and all these great metaphors, and then we get to, thou art wisdom. I am wisdom. And at first I was like, you've got to be joking. And then after I did this for a year, which I did, I began to understand what it meant. I began to understand why this is the perfect prayer for wisdom. And you know what? It took me a year. It took me a year of saying this every single day, morning and night, and every time that I could remember any moment of devotional prayer or of remembrance, I would say this, thou art wisdom. I am wisdom. And I would say the rest of the prayer over and over. I loved this prayer because it was so short. O Spirit, thou art I am thou. Thou art wisdom. I am wisdom. Thou art bliss. I am bliss. And I would say in conjunction with this, one of Master's affirmations for wisdom, O Spirit, thou dost know the cause and end of all things. I am thy child. I want to know life's true mysteries, life's true joyous duties. Thy wisdom in me shall show all things that thou dost know, that thou dost know. And frankly, that one was a lot more helpful to me at first, because I was like, okay, I kind of get it now. But then this other one really illuminated for me what wisdom really means. Wisdom is not of the intellect. Wisdom is not the ability to give a well-structured lecture or to be able to give a definition of truth nor of happiness. But wisdom is the recognition in all parts of your being that you are now in possession of the kingdom of God. That's true wisdom. And so this prayer actually elegantly is teaching you not only what wisdom is, but how to be wise. O Spirit, thou art I am thou. Thou art wisdom. I am wisdom. Thou art bliss. I am bliss. Paradoxical. I love it. I love it. I think it's totally appropriate to get a little bit upset with God sometimes. I'm very charmed to hear that there was a story of an Indian devotee. And again, I don't know this woman, but this story was told by someone who I would bet my life on the veracity of their statements, so take it as you will. But apparently there was an Indian devotee who really wished to have a experience with Master, a apparition, a vision. And let's be honest, how many of us would love it if Master appeared to us one day, or Jesus appeared in our meditation room, asked to stay for tea. Like, that might be kind of a peak experience in all of our lives. And actually, as a quick aside, it is something worth visualizing if you haven't yet. Like, really visualize, what would you do if Master just boop? and then take it one step further and realize that he is just boop all the time. That's the hard part to remember. But at any rate, I don't know about the rest of you, but when I start approaching that desire to really touch the Master's feet, to be with him, for him to appear to me, I sort of approach it and I put on my best like choir boy impersonation. Oh, sir, I love you so much. I'm such a good boy. Won't you come grace me with your blessings and your presence? And it hasn't panned out yet, at least in that way. But what's really interesting is this woman, this devotee, who is still relatively new on the path, which makes it all the more charming to me, took to scolding Yogananda. And she would say to him in prayer, "You treat me like a dog. You treat me like a stray. You have no affection for me and no love. You walk by me and you see my suffering and you see the yearning of my heart and you do nothing to take care of me. You're supposed to be my spiritual father and this is how you treat me? How could you? You say your love is unconditional, but where are you? You keep saying that that's happening, but I don't feel it. When are you going to show up and prove? Like, put your money where your mouth is." And I started hearing this and I thought, oh my, I would never say that. But you know what? He appeared to her. That's what she said. She said that he appeared to her because she nagged him so bad that he finally showed up. And now, of course, what we must also take from that is she must have done it with just an extraordinary amount of love and just an immense amount of true devotion. But what I really appreciated about that story is she had no pretense. She didn't hide how she actually felt about it, which is what enabled her to actually pray with that much power. She had to put all of her heart into it. And in fact, maybe the reason why Master hasn't come to us in our meditation is because we haven't yet put all of our heart into it. And maybe the day that we do is the day that we'll get to touch those shoes. So when we read Demand for Wisdom, and it gives us 3 little lines that are all inversions of one another, I think it's fair game to scold Master a little bit and say, "Sir, that's what you're going to give me for wisdom? If that's all you're going to give to me, you're just going to have to give me the wisdom because you've given me no other option but to like phone a friend and just like give it to me right here and now. I demand my inheritance because you're not letting me work for it." I think that checks out. I think that works. All right. So I'm going to read one more, and then I'd love to hear some questions, and we'll have some discussions. So, if we're just talking about practical prayers here, and how I just want to highlight that this book is like such a treasure trove of right attitude that we just don't realize. So far, let's think about this. So we've talked about the right attitude to starting a day. We've talked about the right attitude to go through life's trials. We've talked about the right attitude to cultivate wisdom, maybe with like a little bit of a upset feeling towards Master for not giving us a little bit more to work with. We haven't even talked about like how to have a right attitude towards meditation. We haven't even talked about like how to have a right attitude towards like loving our guru, which should be like 101, right? And so, but now he's going to give us a prayer demand for an immediate need to be supplied. This is like, I'm sorry, this is like a book of prayer demands for like financial advice. I wasn't ready for that. So this is prayer 106, demand for an immediate need to be supplied. Father divine, this is my prayer. I care not what I may permanently possess, but give to me the power to acquire at will whatever I may daily need. All right. Let's read that one again. Close your eyes. And again, I want you to imagine, what would it feel like not just to say this, but to really mean it? To be able to level this against God and for him to say, all right, yeah, I got you. So here we go. Father divine, this is my prayer. I care not what I may permanently possess, but give to me the power to acquire at will whatever I may daily need. Now let's just pause and think for a second here. What right attitude is this helping us to deal with? Money is one of the greatest pitfalls on the spiritual path. Let's face it. It's one of the greatest causes of anxiety, of concern, of tribulations, of senses of inadequacy. It is the ends for which so many men sigh and moan, as Swamiji might write in one of his songs. He's got a prayer for how to relate to money, for how to relate to things, for how to ask God for what you need, but how yet not to be attached to it. It's brilliant. And if you think about it, like, what really is wealth? Is wealth a number in your bank account? Or is true wealth the power to acquire at will whatever I may daily need? Put another way, the way I like to frame this to the students, because I've taught the students this prayer. I said, okay, so if you found the magic lamp in Aladdin and the genie comes out, but he says, I'm sorry, I'm like the 99-cent store genie. I can only give you a very specific wish. It's not even 3. It's kind of just like a weird question. But the genie says, all right, so I can give you either $500 billion, so you can be wealthier than Elon Musk, wealthiest person alive, wealthiest person in human history as far as we know, or I can give you the power to acquire at will that which you daily need. Which one are you picking? I mean, listen, when I say this to the kids, they're like, $500 billion is a lot of money, Keshav. To which I respond, you're right, it is. But isn't the other power kind of cooler? I mean, like, if you were going to write a superhero, like, obviously it's the other one that's a cooler superhero. But I digress. As you can see, teaching high school has addled my brain a little bit. All right, I'm going to end with one last one to sort of wrap it up in sort of a direction that we might have initially anticipated. This is prayer demand. This is one of the prayer demands for devotion. This is called Intoxicate Me with the Wine of Thy Love. This is prayer demand 137. This was the first one that I memorized, so it has a particular sweetness for me. So let's all close our eyes. And for this poem, I want you to all imagine that you are on your meditation, at your meditation seat, in front of your altar, at the daily place of your sadhana and daily time. And let's try to imagine that this prayer is an extension of our ardor and our sincerity, our aspiration to find God and to be one with him. Imagine that you are uttering this prayer at the conclusion of your meditation, at that deepest point when your mind and heart are most still, when God is closest. Intoxicate me with devotion's wine. I will drink of thee until death. My earthly desires are now dead, and I will live in thee forever. A thrilling current runs through each cell of my body and through every opening of my love for thee. Saturated with devotion, I will enter the heaven of thy presence. Groping blindly, the urge of my devotion suddenly flings open the secret door in my soul. Oh, what bliss I feel on beholding thy light. Oh, what bliss I feel on beholding thy light. Oh, what bliss I feel on beholding thy light. So as you can see, There is a prayer for every hour, for every day. There's a prayer for everything that you might aspire towards, and there's a prayer for everything that you already are. One thing that Swamiji really recommended, which I think applies beautifully to this book, is to work with our own natures. That if you find yourself to be a person naturally of great courage, take the prayer for courage. If you find yourself to be a person of deep sincerity or devotion, take a prayer for devotion. If you find yourself, concerned about money or finances, take a prayer for that. Work with yourself as you really are, not with how you think you ought to be. Accept your circumstances as they are, and then try to spiritualize them. And so on and so forth. And I think through that, this book can be more than just a series of poems and a series of words printed on a page, but it can be the living guide of Master, of Yogananda, teaching us how to love God more and more deeply in every waking moment of our lives. So, anybody have any questions or thoughts or inspirations or knock-knock jokes or anything at all?
The last whisper you read, the Elon Musk one, that to me is more a prayer for trust and faith.
Indeed.
More so than money. Is that what you said was about financial?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because if you could talk to the Lord of the universe, why would you bother asking for money? Yeah. But the power to acquire what you may daily need. Because of course money is only a symbol for energy. Money is only a symbol of the capacity to, it is only the symbol for energy that we exchange with other people for goods and services. Money itself means nothing. And so, if you're putting your faith in God and saying, God will give me the power and the energy to accomplish and to give me what I need at the time I need it, then what does money matter to you anymore? Yeah.
The Indian lady who scolded Master for not showing up, I think your strategy of repetition worked there because she repeated enough number of times. What we are not doing yet.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe she got lucky. Maybe it was after day one. I don't know. I don't know her.
I think everything, repetition is the main thing.
Yeah, repetition with increasing concentration and willpower is one of the secrets to success. By deeper, longer, thirsty, guru-given meditation comes the celestial samadhi.
To hold the concentration in there is hard, like you are saying that you are challenged.
Yeah, and that's why we should be grateful that we get to have a daily life. It is hard to concentrate unendingly. So we might not have done so well if we were asked to meditate for 12 hours a day. I like doing work. I like doing God-reminding work. And so if I can do God-reminding work and remember to serve God in all of the children that I work with, that might serve me better as a devotee because it's easier for me to concentrate in those settings. Yeah. Gertz, you've been awful quiet. What do you think? That's great.
I really admire that. So they take one prayer, repeat for a year. It's really inspiring.
I'm kind of thick-headed, but I'm doggedly persistent sometimes. And so, I think, God has blessed me with a lot of examples of really high spiritual consciousness. I had the great good karma of being able to grow up around Swami Kriyananda and all of the great devotees on this path. And so I've seen what wisdom can be. And I just really hungered to not just see it, but to be it. And in a sense, that's what Jesus was referring to in the Sermon on the Mount of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. In a weird way, like one of the greatest things you could pray for is to ask God to make you desperate for God. Because that's the only thing that will pull your heart into such single-pointed focus as to actually win him. Yeah. So, am I admirable, or have I just suffered enough? Yeah. But, and for some people it might not be necessary to do something for so long. You should only do a prayer like this for as long as it yields fruits of inspiration. If you find that the magnetism has shifted, or the winds have changed, move in a different direction. But for me, that was something that I desired so deeply that I was able to persist with it until I suddenly basically just woke up one day and I realized, I think I'm starting to know. And of course, my romance with wisdom will be a lifelong one until there's no more life left, and only the infinite life. But at any rate, I'll circle back when I get there. Any other thoughts? Anything?
How to respond to criticism with kindness. How to do that. Sometimes it's really hard.
It's extremely hard. Well, the honest answer would be first, frankly, say, I don't know. I don't know how he could write that prayer. If I'm saying, try and get to the point where you feel like you could have written that prayer, I haven't accomplished that with that poem yet. And so I'm in a similar boat. Now, I have some practical pieces of advice to directionally move towards that, which is, one, if you can't respond with sweetness, try not to respond at all. Just wait. That often the criticism brings up a whole host of agitated feelings and emotions. But like a storm, if you wait for that storm to settle and you can respond from a place of calmness, even if you need to defend yourself or need to defend truth, then you can do so in an impersonal way. And so, if at all possible, see if you can take time. A really brilliant piece of advice given by Yogananda's guru is that if someone is criticizing you and is unwilling to hear a reasonable discussion on the topic, you don't want to tell them that they're right, which is something that those of us who do not like confrontation might be tempted to do. But Sri Yukteswar said to simply say, well, perhaps you're right. And I thought that was very helpful, because if you confront people sometimes when they're criticizing you, they will only criticize you more or insist upon your faults and failings. But for example, if someone, I love it, that if someone comes in and is all brimstone, hell and fire to criticize you, Kate, you're all these things, you're blah, 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 and you know what you really need to do? You need to do this. And you say, wow, you know what? I'll really think about that. What do they say next? They'll go, yeah, you better. And you say, yeah, thanks, I will. and then now what? Should we go get coffee? And it kind of ends there. And so if you can, and what's brilliant is if you say, I'll think about it, that's not lying. You could think about it. And what is also true, and this is something that I have to remind myself when people are criticizing me, is I have to remind myself, Keshava, do you want to defend yourself or do you want to know what's really true? And that if someone criticizes me, but it's reality, I'd rather hear it than not, most of the time. And so in that case, when someone begins to levy criticisms or harshness against me, I pause and I think to myself, okay, Keshava, listen and ask, is this Divine Mother actually pointing out something? And I try to listen impersonally, as if it wasn't them saying it to me, but I listen as if I was watching this play out like in a movie, and I'm just watching and assessing, and then I can then say, no, I don't think that shoe really fits, but thanks for your attention. And what's really interesting is, in a sense, when people come to criticize you, or if they try conscientiously to hurt you, the ultimate snub is strangely enough to remain calm and untouched. Because the more you remain untouched by their harshness or their cruelty, the more they will try to harm you. But if you can retain command and control of your heart, by the end of the experience, the only thing they will have done is ruined their own inner peace. And so, in a weird way, you'll have your revenge if you can keep calm and just sail right through whatever they have to say. And then the next step, how do you respond with sweetness, with kindness? That is a harder step, certainly, because that requires not only that we not become contractive, but actually rather that we keep our heart expansive and that we are actively in a state of blessing that other person. And that's very hard. And we need to be honest that I think sometimes we kind of overstep our capacities, and we think because we're told, oh, you should bless everybody who wishes you ill. Honey, you might not be strong enough to do that. And it might not be authentic. You might be better off just distancing yourself than to think yourself capable of that. However, one thing that I try to, when I'm in possession of myself and when the criticism is not so harsh as to overrule all of my cognitive faculties, when my heart is in control, which basically translates to when their criticism doesn't really hurt me, you know what I mean? Then what I like to do is I like to actually pray to their soul. Because in a sense, every soul is only ever doing what they think will bring them to happiness. And so when someone is being cruel or unkind or, unfairly critical, if you can look at them with the eyes of wisdom in that moment, you'll actually see a soul suffering and trying desperately to escape the self-imposed bondage of ignorance and deep pain. And in that, there's compassion. Because what you can sometimes see in that when people make mistakes, if it's directed at you or others, is that you wish you could help them learn another way to live. And in that, then, is the opportunity to pray to God, to ask to help them. Maybe not, God, please help them to see that I'm actually an angel and that they should actually be bowing before my feet, but rather, God, help them to find peace. Help them to find what is true. Help them soothe their hearts. And also really, here's another interesting one, which may or may not be relevant to you. But I realized once when I allowed somebody to criticize me really unfairly and extremely harshly over a long period of time, that I was actually doing them a real disservice by that. Because they would get a lot of bad karma for treating me so badly. And actually, it was interesting because I didn't want to defend myself, because I thought, no, that's just my ego. Let them say what they will. I'm not going to defend myself. But then I realized, but wait a minute, Keshava, you are a good man. And for them to be so unkind to you is actually quite bad for them. And so, in a weird way, I realized I needed to stop them from doing that to protect them. Because it was just wrong. I realized that I would have stepped in, if they were criticizing someone else of equal character, I would have stopped them. I would have said, you really maybe shouldn't do that. They don't deserve that. And you might get some bad karma for treating them like that. And so I realized actually as an act of compassion, it was my job to stop that behavior from continuing, not as an act of self-preservation. And that was an interesting distinction for me. Am I able to do that at all times? Absolutely not. Sometimes my high school students drive me absolutely up the wall. But then 30 seconds later, I apologize to them and we move on. So at any rate, it's a good question. And that's the study of a lifetime right there. Good luck.
Then how did you react to him?
To
When
whom?
you thought that it is a disservice to let him continue with his criticism, then what did you do to him? Did you say, no, do not do that, or what did you do?
I just started saying, I don't think you're right. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I really am, but I don't think you're correct. And then, I removed myself from that situation, and I stopped allowing them the opportunity to criticize me. Because I was like a lamb that kept walking into the tiger's jaws, like in the name of like ego abasement. It wasn't very helpful, If you keep going into an alleyway and someone mugs you every time, like stop going in that alleyway. So yeah, self-evident knowledge with Keshava.
And if it's your relative or husband or wife or brother, sister.
That's where things get really challenging, right? Is when you can't really avoid them. So, here's another thing that you can try, because I have a relatively large family by American standards. I have 3 siblings, and then, you add into that their respective girlfriends, and then wives, and then children, and then blah, 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 blah. And then you add into the equation that we're all very different men, and my oldest brother is very assertive, very confident of his capabilities, and my other brothers are much more introspective and shy. And you get some explosive family dynamics sometimes. And I remember one point, there was a whole gumbo of family drama going on, and everybody was upset at somebody else. It's like a love triangle, but of rage. And I was the only person who was like, just kind of fine, it's just another Christmas with the family. And one of my brothers said, "How are you not absolutely losing your mind with this person right now?" And I said, "You know what? I've just kind of made up my mind that like whatever they do to me, I'm going to forgive them and I'm going to love them. And so like they can do that if they want, but you're not going to get me." And so what I mean to say by that is I was practicing something that a friend of mine coined as pre-forgiveness. That before I entered into the Thanksgiving bloodbath, I mentally went through everybody who might be sitting at that table, and I would think to myself as I visualized them, no matter what ridiculous things you say tonight, I choose that I'm going to forgive you no matter what. And I would just go down the line like that. And then, no matter what happened, I would just kind of get a good laugh out of myself and say, okay, you're testing the power of my forgiveness, aren't you? And, and what's interesting, though, is I'll just go it one step further, is to say that for me, in my family, I'm the one with whom I'm the person with whom everybody has a good relationship. That there might be, triangles of disharmony and stuff like that, but I can get along with everybody. And I think part of it is that when people understand that you love them unconditionally and that you forgive them unconditionally, you might not tolerate their, ridiculousness, but you're going to love them. They tend to relax because, what's interesting is so many people's egos are just so fragile. They're so tender. They're so vulnerable because everybody's afraid. Everybody's vulnerable. Everybody's self-concerned. And so in a weird way, the less you think about yourself and the more you think about them, the less they might need to criticize you. Now, is that easy? Absolutely not. And should you have a friend call you and have an excuse to get out of there? Absolutely, if you need to. But yeah, good luck. Golly. I don't do family Christmas anymore. There's a reason for it. I got a lot of work to do. Anybody else? Good questions, Kate. Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm thinking that also it's like, I don't know how to explain it very well in English, or as
You can say it in Spanish and we'll have it translated.
is, but also that you mentioned karma, no? Also it's karma, no?
Yeah,
Because it's our karma.
everything's karma, right?
We did something that now we are getting back that. So I think that also gives us like a distance and perspective that, okay, once I did the same thing, so now I am receiving this karma.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because if we remember that, then karma, then that idea can help us to stop resisting life. That if we think that everything is for our own good, which is really what the law of karma is saying, that if I get in a car accident, that car accident was in response to a karmic wave of energy that I sent out. And so this is actually, although obliquely, helping to bring me back to equilibrium. So therefore, it's for my good. So therefore, I should accept it. So I should be courageous. A lot easier said than done. But what I think is really interesting is that there's a distinction here that I think is really worth making, is although the karma might be for your own good, it's what will free you from that karma is the degree of your non-attachment to it and your attitude with which you receive it. And so if we receive our karma, for example, maybe our family is bad to us, and then we start thinking to ourselves, well, it must have been because I was really wicked to them in the past lifetime, so I deserve this. Actually, you'll just magnetize more of that to yourself, because now you're beginning to become identified with wickedness as the central identity. Oh, I've been really wicked, so it's my karma. Yeah, it's ironic. You end up self-perpetuating it. Rather, what we should be is self-offering. We should be unattached. We should allow it to, because we don't want to reciprocate all karma. We want to negate karma. And so when that karma comes to us, we should say, well, it's come to me, so therefore it's mine, but I don't want it to be mine any longer, hopefully. And at that point, then you can say, God, I don't want this to be my karma anymore, so take it from me. It's no longer mine. I am no longer the doer in this situation. It is thine and thine alone. And I offer it to thee, all of my past actions, all of my past deeds, all of the seeds that hold this to me, I roast in the fire of thy divine presence. And then we try and be free of it. And that's a really important thing. And that, what's interesting is that a karma, as long as we live in the material plane, we will be subject to the whips and trials that the body is subject to. And so, what I mean to bring out by that is to say that it's the karma, you will not know that you're free of karma when your life is perfect. You'll know that you're free of karma when it no longer touches you that this world is imperfect. That we need to neutralize the feelings, not the external reality. That's what's much more important. And so, yes, that if someone is cruel to you, we may have been cruel to them in the past. What's more important than even trying to make reparations for that, oh, they were cruel to me, I must have been bad to them in the past, so I'm going to go try and become nicer to everybody. Sure, fine. But try to just overcome that. Try to get back into the inner haven of your own peace. Try to eliminate the cord that binds you to identification with all action, and just get back to that essential remembrance that God created me. God created all of this world and all of creation. It is Him acting through me, and it is Him punishing me. It is Him. He is playing all the parts. And the more we can get rid of that single snaky word, I, the happier we'll tend to be. Does that sort of make sense? Interesting line of thought.